Hello, welcome back. We're at the Precious Metals Summit in Zurich, and I'm with Grant Williams, the author of Things That Make You Go and the Grant Williams podcast. Grant, good to be with you.
Peter, good to see you, my friend.
You too. Interesting couple of weeks, right? And I think this is a great time to be doing a Precious Metals conference to get a bit of a feel as to what the ramifications are, if there are any, on what happened last week, the election. I guess to kick things off, how different are you viewing the gold market in particular today as you did 2 weeks ago?
No differently at all.
No.
You know, I think the elections are very short-term things, and yes, they have 4-year ramifications, but if you look back through all of history, the periods where there are real changes, when an administration changes, are few and far between. Generally, the policies continue, some of them get changed, but the direction of travel remains the same. You know, gold, we sit and talk about things that happened in the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months. You know, gold is a 6,000-year asset, right? Yeah. And so when you look at new all-time highs in gold, you're talking about 6,000-year high prices, nominal prices. And so people think about gold in a very short-term frame, and that's fine for some people. If you're speculating on the gold price, and you're looking to buy gold, you think it's going higher and you're going to sell it when it goes higher, it's totally fine, but you shouldn't look at it as gold. You should look at it as a trading vehicle. Yeah. And that's totally fine. A lot of people do that, and because of the nature of gold, there's always plenty of volatility you can trade. It's a really good trading vehicle. It's a much better store of value, and it's a much better protection from inflation, and it's a much better way to protect your purchasing power. That's essentially, for me personally, what gold's all about. So I look at the election, and gold's fallen after the election, but that's probably because some traders who thought the price would rise after the election result, if it went the right way, piled in and bought a short-term trade. They're now selling out of it. It doesn't really matter unless you are focused on the day-to-day prices. If you own gold and you're not renting it, then you have a completely different outlook. Your time frame is different, your time horizon is different, and the things that you care about in terms of changes to the price are completely different. Yeah. So, you know, that I think is the most important thing, and I've talked about this a lot this past 12 months, understanding who you are as a person. Are you a trader, are you an investor, are you a speculator? And why do you hold gold? Do you hold it for price appreciation? Do you hold it for the reasons I talked about a while ago? Once you understand that, really understand it, then you've got a base from which you can start assessing the conditions.
Okay, all right, fine. So different people will have different reasons for getting into gold, right? But in terms of the overall thematic and why you might want to hold gold for the next couple of years, do you not think there has been a shift in terms of what the policy will, because in reality, the US does hold a lot of the does play a lot of the strings in terms of what happens on foreign policy. Yep. The US dollar and what happens with the US dollar has a huge impact on gold.
Yes.
Well,
Historically,
yes.
Yep.
And there have been a lot of commentators that have been saying, you know, what about if the BRICS, or what if Russia do a gold-backed currency, this and the other. That looks, in my opinion anyway, looks a lot less certain under a Trump administration than it would another. Okay. Maybe we can disagree on that, but for me, as much as I love gold as an investment, and I see the value in it, I get a sense that it has weakened slightly, or it will weaken slightly, if what Trump is saying in terms of stopping the war in Ukraine and Russia, strengthening the economy, managing inflation, things like that, that should, in theory, settle the gold price, and at least maybe not stop it from going down too much, but stop it from increasing 30% as we have seen over the last sort of 12 months.
But again, let's look at your choice of language there. Yeah. You think it might weaken. You're talking about the price. You think the price might fall in the next couple of years. You're talking about the price. And that's absolutely fine, and that's my point. If the price is what you're focused on, you can find reasons why the price might go down here, the price might go up there. There are all kinds of reasons for a price to move, and they're very short-term in nature. For me, the way I look at it, and this idea that things change under a Trump administration as far as the BRICS are concerned, it's possible. But again, people focus on Kazan, and they look at that and say, well, nothing happened in Kazan, therefore nothing's going to happen. The BRICS didn't exist 20 years ago, right? So this is not, we're going to form the BRICS, nothing's done, we're going to disband the BRICS. The BRICS is now an organization, a growing organization, and the BRICS have a very real reason to diversify away from the dollar.
Yep.
It's in their individual interest, it's in their collective interest. So that is not going to change. Those interests aren't going to change unless there is a fundamental shift in the policy of the entire Western world, which is very unlikely at this point, given the constraints under which they're operating.
Yeah.
So just because the BRICS didn't announce the unit at Kazan, the gold price falls on the back of that, not because the unit is never going to be unveiled, but because it didn't get announced then, and the speculators who came in before that thinking it's going to get announced and we'll get. So there's a lot of speculative noise around the price at any given moment in time, but this idea that Trump being president might weaken the gold price, I'm perfectly willing to accept that. My point, I guess, is let's look at the long-term reasons why people want to own gold. Not buy gold or rent gold or speculate on the price, but why would you want to own gold? Now, the biggest reason, or the biggest change in that reasoning for me, happened when the Treasury froze Russian central bank assets back in 2022. That, to me, and I wrote about this at the time, was an incredibly crucial inflection point and a massive mistake, I think, by the way, because it basically said to every central bank in the world, this could happen to you.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And this, the confiscation of reserve assets, is a national security issue. So whatever Trump does or doesn't do, however much Trump plays nice and cozies up to different people or doesn't, he's not going to cozy up to everyone, he's not going to alienate everyone. So some people are going to get the cold shoulder and some are going to get the hug. And that will shift and change. But all of these people now know that under certain conditions, if we take a side that's in opposition to the United States policy, potentially we could have our assets frozen. It's a last resort, but it can happen because it has. It hadn't happened before then. So because it can happen, and because it's a national security issue, if it does, you can't just sit by and think, well, it can happen, but it probably won't, because we're mates with the US and we have been forever. Right? There have been periods of much closer relationships between the US and Russia. There's been détente between the US and Russia at various periods. I mean, yes, it's been a contentious relationship for the most part, but look at '89 when Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. There was rapprochement. There were periods where they were much closer. So now you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice but to hope the Americans don't screw you too.
It's funny you say that because I think you're right, but at the same time, those who do feel like they're friends with the US, the Western markets in particular, their central banks aren't buying gold at the same rates as those who feel alienated.
They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. But there are plenty of them that are either not buying as many treasuries anymore or have been divesting their treasuries.
Yeah,
the
well,
Saudis
Japan as well, obviously.
Japan.
Yeah.
But the point is this. The point is your allies on many levels can still be your allies. You can still back Trump's policy in the Middle East. You can still back the tariffs. You can still do all these things. The problem here is the dollar. And because of the way the dollar sits at the bottom of energy policy around the world, every country on earth trades in energy one way or other. You are either an exporter or an importer of energy, and both of them therefore have to hold dollars, either as payment or as collateral to pay for oil. That's pure and simple. So if you're forced to hold US dollars, and there is a set of circumstances under which they can get confiscated, you have a very real problem to try and mitigate. And gold is the perfect mitigation to that.
Yeah.
Gold is correlated with the dollar for the most part. I suspect that has changed and it may continue to change, and we can talk about that if you like in a second why. But holding gold as a neutral reserve asset that nobody can confiscate if you hold it in your own country is a sensible way to mitigate the problem of potentially having your assets frozen by a capricious US government at some point in the future.
Okay. What about yields in terms of other areas? Now that we are seeing a Trump government, are you expecting to see bond yields go up would that have any impact? Again, I guess it's this what you've been saying essentially. It depends what you're buying gold for, right? And I understand the reason why a lot of central banks are buying gold, and they're really the ones that are moving the price. But for a day-to-day person, is gold a relevant investment for you, or is it really now for the central banks?
Look, it depends on your time. Everything's based on your time pricing. If you say to me, is gold a relevant investment for you over the next 12 months, I don't think that's as clear-cut an answer, because we could see an awful lot of volatility in there. And again, if you don't have a stomach for volatility, gold's probably the wrong investment for you.
No.
If you said to me, is gold a sensible investment for the next 5 years, I would say absolutely yes, at the right percentage allocation of your total portfolio, depending on a lot of other things. So trying to boil things down like this to really simple things for people is problematic.
Yeah.
People need to understand their timeline first and foremost. And with regards bond yields, I think we live in inflationary times. I think that's clear. And I think when we talk about the dollar and the dollar's going to do this under Trump, the only real solution right now to the problems is more spending. Bigger deficits, more spending, more debt. And that is not good for bond yields, and it should be good for gold. But if that's the only reason you're holding gold, you are going to see all kinds of headlines come out that are going to send bond yields down, and recessionary indicators that send bond yields down, and then inflation. It's not. Gold is unless you're very good at it, I think it's a terrible speculation instrument.
Yep.
But if you are a long-term investor looking for the things I talked about earlier on, it's arguably the best asset on the planet to mitigate those particular problems.
Do you think it doesn't really matter if Trump's in or anyone's in, the debt levels at the moment, essentially governments need to inflate their way out of this debt trap? That's just inevitable now?
Yeah, I do. I think the spending will be different in nature. If Harris had been in, it would have been forgiving student loans and stimulus and first-time home grants and all these kinds of things. Trump, it'll be different in nature. It's going to be tax cuts. It's going to be but ultimately the problem is the same facing both administrations. You have massive deficits, and the CBO is predicting them at 8 to 9% as far as the eye can see.
Yeah.
That is a problem for the US dollar. That is a problem for the US Treasury market, and we've seen obviously Yellen move to the front end of the curve dramatically. Duration is going to be a real problem. So those specific set of issues that the Trump administration have to face are the same as the Harris administration would have to face. They would deal with them in different ways, but ultimately the tax receipts that they're getting do not cover the expenditures. Yeah. And they weren't going to cover them for Trump, they're not going to cover them for Harris. It doesn't matter. The problem is an intractable one, and the answer, sadly, is inflation, or it is a serious recession where unemployment goes up and consumer spending goes down and prices come down along with demand. That's kind of where we're at. And, Trump and whoever his Treasury Secretary is, and maybe Jay Powell stays, maybe Powell goes, I don't know, they are going to be trying to deal with that problem. But because of where we are, in 2008, the Fed had $700 million in its balance sheet. They're now at 9 or trillion or whatever the number is now. They don't have the leeway they had all those years ago to get creative. So they're going to be forced to do things that are, overtly either inflationary or overtly confiscatory, or they're now forced to policy that is forced upon them rather than choices they make.
Okay, given that's the state of play, what do you think that means for the equity markets, especially in the mining space? And I guess you probably want to divide that up between the producers and the non-producers.
Yeah. Look, I think. Okay, so the backdrop is there is an incredibly good case for the gold price to continue to be strong going forward, and I mean over a longer period of time. That means that should be, cost control notwithstanding, that should be very good for mining companies. However, the volatility that will be inherent in that gold is not going to go up in a straight line. We've seen a pullback the last few days, and you tend to see the miners pull back a lot more because that's just the way they're just levered gold. So anybody that believes that gold's going higher and thinks I can get more juice out of this by investing in the mining companies has one of two options. They buy an ETF, they buy GDX or GDXJ depending on their risk appetite. Perfectly acceptable way of doing it, but you have to accept the volatility that comes to that. Or you come to an event like this, you do your due diligence, you work out which companies are going to buy, which companies have great management, have terrific assets in great jurisdictions, have a history of cost management, have all the things going for them that, whether it's a gold mine or a textile manufacturer or a car company, they have a good business that's well run. And the trouble with gold bull markets is that everybody has dollar signs in their eyes and they think 10 bagger, 20 bagger, 50 bagger, 100 bagger, because it's happened before and it will happen again.
Yeah.
But the people that make the money out of the 50 baggers are the people who've been very precise in where they put their capital because they've done the work and they haven't bought a gold stock because a mate of theirs gave them a tip, which happens all the time in these markets. Hey, I've bought this.
Yeah.
Well, he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to buy that too. You know, there's no substitute for due diligence, proper due diligence, really understanding the companies that you're buying in and thinking of owning shares and being an owner of a company rather than buying shares. You know, we used to talk about, I want to own a stake in this company. Now we talk about buying the shares. And when you buy shares, the inference is you're going to sell the shares. So it's not really about the company, it's about, or the business, it's about the price of the shares. If it goes up, great. If it doesn't, you don't know what to do because you don't know how to evaluate the business performance.
Okay, and what are you mainly looking at now? Obviously you're here, I think you've got a chat with Mark Faber later today. What are you, I guess in a way, obviously Mark Faber is such a decorated veteran of the gold market and the wider market in general. I guess, what are you trying to learn from people like him while you're here?
Yeah, Mark's an extraordinary guy. He's been around a long, long time. He understands the world very well. But with Mark, you know, what the beauty of Mark for me is how he thinks, not necessarily what he thinks. Because what we think can be wrong. You know, you and I could be absolutely certain about something. We'll wake up tomorrow to a Twitter video from Trump and it's completely out the window.
Yeah, true.
But how Mark thinks about things, you know, that's something, if we listen to how he thinks about things, the way he approaches a topic, the way he analyzes a subject, the way he thinks about gold, that we can take in and use ourselves to apply to all kinds of different things. So, you know, whenever I talk to Mark, I'm always interested in how he thinks about something and why he thinks that way rather than what he thinks. Because if I say to Mark, so, you know, what do you think the gold price is going to be next week? He doesn't know. He's guessing. It's an educated guess and a very educated guess in his case, but it's a guess. But if I ask him, how do you think about the Trump victory? We then get an insight into how his brain works and how he takes this information in and how he comes up with potential scenarios for that. And that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Of that ilk, how are you processing information? What are the main things you're looking out for at the moment?
Well, I take a very long view of this. You know, I expected Trump to win. The word I was using when I was talking about it was handily. I didn't use the landslide word, but it was a landslide. I thought he'd win pretty easily, but I know it didn't dream he'd win the way he did, which I think is great. Whether you like Trump or not, it's great that we have someone in the White House with that kind of mandate.
Yeah, I agree.
And the people who believe he's a Nazi and all this stuff, I don't know what to say to them.
Yeah.
The American democracy has survived 249 years, 248 years. It'll survive 2 more, I promise you that much. Yeah. But having a president in power who has the House, that has the Senate, who has the popular vote, who has promised to do policies that clearly resonate with the majority of Americans, I think is a great opportunity. And I don't think it's going to be without pain. You know, I don't think it's going to be without pain. But Trump has a chance to drive through policy, to perhaps stop the war in Russia and Ukraine by being the first guy willing to talk
to both sides.
Putin and Zelensky, whereas the others just haven't even wanted to engage. There's a chance he could change the situation in the Middle East. I mean, you know, I said this the other day talking about his victory to someone. I said, you know, it wouldn't surprise me to see Trump win the Nobel Peace Prize next year, which is an extraordinary thing.
Arguably, potentially should have done last time around.
We could argue that all day long, and I think there's a strong case to be made for it. But if there's a photograph of Trump at Camp David with Putin and Zelensky shaking hands, or Netanyahu and whoever the 14th man in line at Hamas is to take up, you know, I think those are things that Trump could actually push through and could affect. And sadly, for the people that believe that we shouldn't even engage with Putin, we shouldn't talk to him, a majority of Americans have voted for a guy who said, I can end the war on day one.
Yep.
And people are tired of it all, they're tired of all the money going, particularly when things are tight. So there are a lot of reasons for this to happen. And so when you ask me how I evaluate things, I think once we get through this initial, we're through the denial stage, we're into the anger stage, we will get to acceptance of Trump.
Yep.
And once we do, and people are forced to just sit back and let him be president, he's going to do things that are going to irritate a lot of people, including me.
Yeah.
He's going to, give crazy press conferences. He's going to say dumb things. He's going to do all this stuff. But he has a chance to put policies in place that might, hopefully, make a meaningful difference. And I'm absolutely prepared to give him that chance.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's funny as well. It's like when you saw him come in 2016, you saw, I think a lot of people have been talking about this wide-scale protests, even MPs in London sort of saying nasty things about Trump and whatnot. None of that really this time around.
Not yet. I mean, I think people are still in shock.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad enough for them that he won the first time around, even though, again, it was clear he was going to win. They never thought once they got rid of him, he would come back. And I think the fact that he has, and the fact that he's come back so strongly, is finally, in the last couple of days, I've seen the first embers of the left starting to be more reflective and think, okay, we've missed something here.
Yeah, maybe it's not them, maybe it's us.
Maybe we need to change because this has not gone the way we thought it was going to do. And if the initial response from all these guys was, the American people have got this wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think they have.
No.
I don't think they have. But look, I don't believe Trump will end American democracy. I don't think he will become a dictator. Hey, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so.
I think, look, you've got people like J.D. Vance, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk. Look, you've got enough sensible people around this guy that will have their own ambitions to
I wouldn't include Musk with the others, but we can differ on that.
He may be head of Doge or Doge or whatever they're going to call it, Department of Government Efficiency, but anyway, you've got enough people around him and he's starting to share that balance. But I agree. In 2016, it seemed like it was the Trump show. It was a one-man band. He was calling the shots, and that was.
I don't think he expected to win. I honestly don't think he expected to win.
I don't think he.
I don't think he went into the race expecting to win. And when he did, you can see now he's got 3 months until the inauguration, 2 months till the inauguration. He's already putting a cabinet together, and you can see that there's been thought beforehand. Because I think he
100%.
thought.
Well, he's already come out and said, Nikki Haley, no way, you're not in the government anymore.
And Pompeo's out.
Pompeo's out. Yeah.
This guy, Tom, whatever his name is going to be the guy in control of the border. So there's stuff being done. Kennedy was obviously there. He expected to win this time.
Yeah.
I think he's learned a lot of mistakes. My worry about Trump is that I don't think at his core he has very, very strong, deep-rooted beliefs about anything. I don't think he has a core. And so I think he's susceptible to the next good idea that comes in. I don't really know if he's strong on these policies that have resonated with Americans, someone comes along and turns his head and says, hey, what about this? I just kind of feel he doesn't have that deep root, but I could be completely wrong about that. What I do think is that he understands how Washington works better now. He has got better people around him, and people talk about the chaos and the turnover in his administration the first time around. I think that's because he suddenly said, I've got to hire a whole cabinet now. Quick, find me an energy secretary, find me a secretary of state.
Then
and they brought Tillerson in, and they brought these other people in, and then quickly went, no, wrong guy.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll happen this time around.
Yeah.
It was characterised in 2016 that, as soon as you disagree with Trump, you're out. I don't think that was it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. None of us know. I just think I'm a lot more hopeful about this than the people are who lost. But I think given time and some self-reflection, maybe they come around to the fact that, look, if that many Americans want this guy and what he's promised, maybe we need to think about that. And they do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess just linking it back finally just to the overall markets. I know you don't want to focus too much on the short term, and especially with gold, you want to look at this longer term horizon. But Are you a bit more optimistic now on the equity side? Are you saying that this should generate? We saw pretty much all-time highs under his last presidency of the Nasdaq and other indices. Are you expecting a similar trajectory, or is the economic shape of the world just so much different now that it's?
No, I think this time around you have a strong underpinning in that the gold price is firm, and there's a really good price insensitive bid underneath it from central banks, which is a great backdrop for precious metal stocks.
Yep.
I think we haven't seen the kind of rush into them yet, because despite gold continually making new highs, people haven't really bought into it. You started to see little bits of it here, and then you see terrible Newmont results, and that crushes people's hopes. You see great Agnico results, and that kind of raises them again. But people, if you've been in the gold and silver space, you are beaten down. You are beaten down. It has been brutal. Even with gold doing what it's doing, you still can't catch a break.
Yeah.
And so the people who are naturally inclined to want to buy gold and silver stocks are still a little bit gun shy, because they've seen this so many times, and I don't know what they're waiting for, but they're clearly waiting for new money to come in that is going to take these stocks higher. And it won't take much new money to come in to drive these stocks higher. No. And then it becomes a momentum play.
Well, this is the really interesting thing for me personally, is I speak to a lot of fund managers, especially in Europe, and the inflows just aren't coming in yet.
Right.
And they haven't been. And I think we're starting to see a little bit more inflows in the US on some of these gold funds, but it's shocking to me that we're in a price environment like we are, the amount of volatility just even globally, with not just markets but obviously conflict as well, that you're not seeing this rush yet.
Well, don't forget, look, the S&P and Dow are all-time highs.
Yeah.
So the stocks that people have been buying instead of gold stocks are still doing well.
Yeah.
So they're not looking to rotate into something else. They're not. It's when those stocks start to falter and go down, and you start to get this rotation, because obviously when they start to go down, you start to get the analyst report saying, oh, these are overvalued, finally. So you're waiting for that, and you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for people to take money from tech, to take money from the places they've been, whether it's index or whatever it may be. There's no reason to come out of that yet, because it's not. They're opening their 401ks, and it's still going up.
Yep.
Once you see equity markets start to fall, the gold price stays steady. Now, at the beginning of that, we all know what will happen to gold and silver equities. They'll fall. It doesn't matter what the gold price is. If the equity markets are falling, gold and silver won't produce.
No.
But once you see that, then people start casting around for, okay, I now realise this stuff's overvalued. It's falling because it's way overpriced. Let's start screening for undervalued stocks. And you know what they're going to see.
Yeah.
Because precious metal stocks are the most undervalued, unloved, hated stocks on the face of the planet. And so smart money will start to come over there. Smart money, the really smart money is already in there. Right?
Yeah.
You've seen that. You've seen people like Druckenmiller putting money into the gold and silver sector. So the smart money's there. The quick money, the people that realise a shift quicker than others, will come over. But it takes that. It takes something not working for money to be reallocated to gold and silver. And I think we're on the cusp of that. But you'll see a fall before you see the rise. And that's, again, it's one more kick in the teeth for people that with gold at all-time highs, they go, geez, the market's going down. Why aren't gold and silver stocks going up, even though the market's going down? They will.
No.
But it takes a little while.
Okay, I'll be looking out for a fall. Grant, thank you.
Pleasure.